Prologue. Time log, November 11th, 20 AD. Two figures sat huddled together on a rock covered by the cold night. The stars filled the dark sky, breaking it up every so often. They sparkled and shined onto the quiet forest of shadows. Off in the distance, a train whistle could be heard. The life of the forest and the town nearby still flowed and stressed, but the two figures had remained motionless for quite some time. Scott, a winsome voice unveiled itself from one of the shadows. There was a little silence. "Yeah," the other, a young man with a stern voice, replied. "Do you promise me?" "Promise you what?" "Promise me that you will come back." He turned his head to her. "Don't worry, the war is almost over. America is easily going to win." "I don't care. You could still die. I want a promise." The other shadow hesitated and just stared off into the distance. "Scott Kitman, I want a promise now." She grabbed him by the sleeve of his shirt and turned him towards her. He stared into her eyes, and she stared back. All of a sudden, she felt a sense of weakness and fragility, and her eyes fell off to the side. Scott took his hand, placed his palm on her cheek, and gently moved her head back to him. She could see kindness in his eyes as they stared directly into her. She felt warmth and strength emanating from his hand as it flowed throughout her. "Of course I'll come back. I promise." He loosened his head and let it sink to hers. For a passionate moment, both lovers held onto the precious time that was aggressively running out. Suddenly, another train whistle could be heard in the distance. Scott slid off the rock and gained his balance, and he looked back at her. Tears rolled down her eyes, and she just stared at him. "It's my time to go," Scott said listlessly, looking off, unable to watch her cry. "Why do they want you so bad? I thought this war was going well." "I'm good at combat. I'm 18, and I want to help out my country." She brought her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them, and continued to stare at Scott as he walked backwards. "Hey!" Scott yelled. He was a good deal away from her, but close enough to still see her look up. "When I come back, I'm going to marry you. I promise." Scott quickly turned around and ran full speed down the path to the train station. She watched as his shadow began to merge with the darkness until it was completely absorbed. Even though she continued to cry, a smile crept itself upon her beautiful face. She could feel the warmth of him still beside her. After about an hour of sitting there, she decided to finally get up. She began walking down the same path Scott had used, towards the train station. She could hear an owl in the distance, letting off its long hoot and flying away. Behind her, a shadow flew from one side of the path to the other. She caught a feeling of the presence and turned around, but saw nothing except darkness. After a few seconds of silence, she felt content and continued to walk down the path. Suddenly, a figure dropped behind her and grabbed her mouth. Unable to scream because of the pressure, she frantically tried to free herself. However, the other hand that was free brandished a large, serrated blade. The figure jerked its hand up and back, causing her to stare directly up at the stars. The next moment, the blade found her neck, and with surgical precision it cut in and across deeply. Blood oozed and shot out from the laceration, and her eyes quickly rolled backwards, and within just a moment, all the force and fight she had was gone. Her face turned gray, and blood stopped flowing from her mouth. The shadow let her fall to the ground with a hard thump. The figure dashed and jumped off the trail as it escaped. There was no trace of struggle or attack, just a young dead girl and her blood on the ground.